Hey there, everyone. It's Hilary here, and you signed into Wearable On Air. Today, I have two special guests with me from 14 Oranges, Sylvain and Dan from 14 Oranges. And before we get on with the show, a little bit about me. I have a PR firm called HJMT Public Relations. I also have a media company where I have four blogs: Tech News Now, New York Lifestyle blog, a triathlete's diary blog, and this show, Hilary Topper On Air. In addition to that, as a result of a triathletesdiary.com, I decided to create the New York Tri Expo 16, which will be held in March, on March 19th at Citi Field. And if you're interested in attending or sponsoring, we still have some openings. You can go to www.nytriexpo.com. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Sylvain and Dan from 14 Oranges. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi, Hilary. Thanks for having us on the air.
So tell me how you guys got into web development, web and mobile app development. Can you just give me a little background?
Yeah, we started in 2009. We saw a void in the app development space, specifically in the Vancouver space area. So we founded the company. We started working on iOS to start with. Quickly added Android as we saw there was a ramp up for Android demand, and then about 3 years later realized that a lot of the apps we were building had some web components to it. So we actually acquired a business to help us on the web side of things.
Awesome. So you guys create mobile and web apps. Can you provide us with an interesting case study that may have happened recently that you could share with our listeners?
Sure. Probably the one that we feel the most strongly. It's actually a very small. It's not a huge deployment, but we feel it's improved the life of the people that are using the app tremendously. So we were approached by a government body, or formerly a government body called the BC Safety Authority, and they're responsible for performing inspections for any sort of contracting type work, like electrical work. You're getting a gas boiler installed, chairlifts, for ski centers, things like that. And basically, they have a staff of about 150 inspectors that are mandated to go and do these inspections. So you have a contractor, they come and install a new kitchen in your house with a new electrical panel. Then an inspector from the BC Safety Authority will come and perform the inspection. And they had I wouldn't say archaic, but they had a very cumbersome mechanism to know what inspections they had to do, because they'll on a typical day they'll do about 100 inspections, and they have a list that they have to do every day and provide pass-fail results and conditional pass and the whole checklist of things that they had to do. So they came to us, and we basically work with them to sort of streamline their flow, and we create an iPad app. So basically now the inspectors will start in the day and will sync their iPad to their central database, and now have all the inspections they're supposed to do during the day, and then they go on their site and perform their inspections. They have all the checklists that they're supposed to do. Everything is stored offline, so if they're deep down in some business where there's no internet at all, there's no problem. All the information is stored locally, and then they can go about their day, and then when they're done, they come back to the office or they go back at home. They synchronize, all the information gets pushed, all the valid permits get distributed as needed. And the success that we found is BCSA, or the Safety Authority, has told us that it's cut their average inspection time from what I recall 1.5 hours down to like 30 minutes. Dan, was that the right number? Like it's 1.5?
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Wow, that's incredible. Um, have you guys been seeing a shift now with wearable tech when it comes to app development, and have you gotten into that at 14 Oranges?
So I would say we're sort of newcomers in the wearable space. We started tracking them, out of personal interests about a year ago. Um, we feel that there's probably, there's two areas where, the wearables are going to hit. So there's the more of the consumer space, and then there's more of the sort of business space. On the consumer space, we haven't seen demand at all. Where people asking, "Hey, we need an app that works with this." It's been actually very quiet. We typically get, a variety of you know, ideas coming to us. We talk to very big companies and very small companies, and we get some, very far-fetched ideas that come, for apps. But we have yet to see one coming for, on the wearable side of things. Now, a lot of things that we've seen are actually things that we think are sort of the next step in the mobile app side of things. It's not been something that's been requested by our customers, but it's something that we're seeing. I think is just going to be the next logical step. So I go back to the example I just provided, where you have a safety inspector, and you can lug a big iPad around, or even an iPad Mini, and it's maneuverable. It's better than having to carry a laptop, but in some cases, you may need to, crawl or do something, and the iPad now becomes, you can't just carry it, you leave it somewhere. And having a smartwatch may provide a little bit more flexibility into, getting still your notification and being able to say, okay, yeah, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and your hands are still in sort of a hands-free mode. And so we see that there's going to be opportunities there. The other place where we think there's again opportunity will be in places where apps as we know them today are not going to be allowed. For example, I'm thinking of a traffic cop, or somebody that's helping control traffic or certain sites. First of all, they got to work in the sun or in the rain, and having them pull their phone out so they can read a message is just not going to work. But the effectiveness of a smartwatch, where within a second you can get the relative information really quickly, I think that will open up for these type of applications.
And just to add to that, even though we haven't been getting ideas with the existing clients that we do have, there is interest. If we bring up wearables to them, they definitely are interested in talking and having a dialogue, but putting necessarily money behind it, or really pushing a product like that, it really hasn't come about yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that for industry, it's easier to have some type of a glass product. That's where I think, Google Glass or any of these glass type products came in to play, because it was hands-free and you could just see in your peripheral vision, or talk about whatever you needed to talk about right there in front of you, as opposed to looking down at your watch or what have you. So, but that's interesting, and I love that you brought those two examples up. I wonder about wearable tech, and I know that it's really been big with consumers, especially with these Fitbits and all of these different type of fitness trackers that are out there. Um, where do you see it going next? I mean, do you see a trend at all in the consumer line? I know you said the business, which I definitely see, but do you also see it for consumers?
I see. I think we're on the cusp of that. We sat down just recently and sort of identified some of the uh, barriers that wearables will have to address in order to, expand more into the consumable space or consumer space. One of them is obviously the battery life. So there's still complaints of the battery life not being adequate. I have a Moto 360. For me, it's actually for my use now. It's adequate. Basically, it'll last 24 hours. So usually by the time I go to bed, I don't wear my watch when I sleep anyway. I put on the cradle, and it's ready for the next day, and it charges really quickly. But when I go on a trip, it's having to carry the extra cradle around is a bit of cumbersome. So if it could last a whole week, like a Pebble, that'd be nicer. So that for me it's okay, but for people, they don't want to have to plug everything. That being said, this is comparable to back to 2007 when the iPhone came out, and people were told, hey, you have to charge your iPhone every day, and you had a Nokia phone that would last like 2 weeks on a single charge. People were like, oh, this is terrible, and people just got used to it. And so there's probably a psychology shift that has to happen as well for these things and that will happen over time. I'm not worried about that. So battery is one. The next one is when you look at smartphones, they've been able to get away with just very few styles. I mean, the iPhone has had 3 styles for I think since 2010, and it's fine, right? People keep them in their purse, in their pocket. But since wearable is a lot more in your face, so I'm a techie. I can live with this one. I had to look at the other Android Wear versions. They're like squarish, and even me, it was like, okay, I'm not going to go there. We've talked to some of the more fashion-aware people in our company, and for them this does not work. Even the Apple Watch is still not quite there yet. But you can see that they've already, these companies are already, seen that and are starting to address. And you can see that in the second generation of the Moto 360, they've come up with, a lady edition, a sport edition. They've really improved on that side of things. LG also came out with the Urban G or something. I forget the exact name. Also to address that. And Apple, Apple first came out of the gate with a lot of different options, and just recently has added the Hermes option. Hermes. So that's these are 2 barriers that need to be sort of addressed. Dan, anything else you want to chime in?
Well, it's kind of interesting if you look at trends. I mean, they're really trying anything right now, and everything. Just not just from watches, but clothing and all those things. And they are calling it an emergent technology, and it is in that mode right now. So it's kind of hard to see what's going to stick. From every few months, they're bringing out something new, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Still a bit niche, and let's see if it's going to stick. Moving that into commercial space. I mean, some of the technologies that are happening in the consumer space, there's a lot of really interesting solution or problems that they can solve once they get to a reliability and the battery life, but which is just not there yet, right? So.
Actually, one thing I'd like to chime in. One place where the wearables have made good inroads, and I think you mentioned that, are the fitness trackers. And it's exactly for that reason. You get a Fitbit, it'll last up to 5 to 6 days on a single battery. They're also provided in many different colors, and they're very they don't stick out as much as this. They're very nice and narrow, and very subtle. So you can have your shirt jacket on top, and or shirt sleeve on top, and you won't notice them, right? So you can see why they've been much more successful, because I think just in 2015 they're approaching 10 million already in sales.
What always gets me about these different fitness trackers, and I actually wear the Garmin 920 XD, which is huge. I mean, it's probably it's probably twice the size of your Moto. I'm actually not wearing it right now, but I actually wear it 90% of the time. And what it does is it tracks everything that I do in terms of triathlon. So my swim, my bike, my run, and then it goes into a program called Training Peaks, which is links with my coach, and then my coach gets to see and track all of my progress. Now, what I can also do is I can share it with my community. And I think that brings up a point that I want to talk to you about, is that do you see these apps becoming more social in the future? It seems like people just like to share everything, so have you seen a demand for that in your business?
It's funny, we touched on that the other day. It's you know, it's going to go up to a point, and they're going to try to push the barrier as to how much is shared, and then eventually, somebody would say, well, oh yeah, I was wearing my watch there, and I got to a place where I wasn't supposed to. I was trying to do a surprise party for my wife, and she ended up finding that I was at the store that buying this thing, and I don't want that. And it's the same. Like, well, Dan, he's a Google Maps user, and he uses this feature to keep track of where his wife was, so that she's not always calling, hey, where are you? Like, oh, okay, she just finished hockey practice. She's driving. I know she'll be home in 10 minutes. And then there were some rulings, I think in the States or in Canada, to say that, hey, those type of features are not allowed. And so Google actually had to pull back that feature, and that's like, hey, I actually like that feature.
So there is definitely like a want for sharing, but there's also the other side where people are pushing back a bit and going, you know what, we're actually providing too much information. So it's kind of interesting is that often the companies want to provide the sharing, and maybe the users don't want that as much, right? So it's an interesting balance. I know that a lot of, not just wearables, but there's apps out there for your phone that can track, for example, your bike rides prior to that, and ski runs and things like that, and those became very shareable as well. They sort of had some very niche and small communities, but it allows them to sort of evaluate what works and what doesn't, which I think is perfect. And as it evolves, and we'll figure out what works and what people want to share and what they don't. And I think that's kind of the state wearables is in, and all those sort of things are in right now.
Now, just it's one little clarification. Dan and I are, not the youngest of guys, so perhaps our views are a little bit skewed, compared to sort of the next generation that tends to be a little bit more, hey, I'm eating dinner and here's my food, and sharing a lot more than we typically would be. So.
Well, they're mostly on Snapchat. Anyway, what I'd like to ask you a little bit about is where do you see 14 Oranges going? Where are you guys going with your business, and where do you see trends?
That's a good question. We're actually, we're open to any sort of app development. So we've done quite a variety of things. We've done mobile app for radio stations, and in fact, actually, we've that's one place where we've actually incorporated the Apple Watch and the Moto 360. So if you download our radio station apps that we have for some of the local radio stations, you'll see how they work on the Apple Watch. And we've done apps, like I mentioned, for BC Safety Authority. We've done apps for cable companies, for phone companies, and we're doing apps for the medical side of things. But where we see that I think there's still some growth in the app space is this mobile workforce, where we think there's still, BCSA again is a prime example of that, and we think there's tons of places that haven't been tapped on that yet. For example, I still see courier coming along and having to sign some piece of paper. You can see some of the bigger entities like FedEx. They have their own widget to you sign and track. But you can see some of the smaller companies that don't have the power or money that FedEx and these other companies that could leverage these things. So that local courier companies, the bike couriers, and again I go back to the construction worker. You also look at policing. If you look at a police officer, their belt has got they got their radio, they got their phone, they got this, they got that, and it's probably a place that's primed to be streamlined by using some wearables, right? So we think there's going to be growth in those areas, and we're sort of positioning ourselves to be able to respond to that.
And companies that right now the mobile space is matured, and you can start seeing return on investment on apps that people have made. So companies that weren't necessarily primed for mobile apps, that you wouldn't think so, can now see that, hey, you know what, this might actually work for our business. So I want to almost count like the second generation of businesses are moving in now and starting to see that they can actually have a benefit to their employees and to their business. And that's where we're seeing a lot more interest in the mobile space.
Very, very cool. Interesting stuff, and interesting. Thank you both so much for being a guest today. Could you share where people could find you guys?
Yeah, you could find us at 14oranges.com, so 14oranges.com.
Great. I want to thank both of you for being on the show, and I want to thank you, our listening audience, for tuning in. If you want more information on this show or any other show, you can visit us at technewsnow.nyc, hjmtmedia.com, or hjmt.com. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.